Hello, my name's Colin Crithers, and I'm a student reporter and broadcaster at the University of Iowa. As a journalist, my job is to tell stories, while also balancing everything else going on in my life as a student. But no one tells our stories. So, my goal is to tell the stories of the student journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers all across the country. Let's walk the student beat. Welcome in. Today we're walking the student beat with Noah Weiskopf. Noah, how's it going, man?
Doing well. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. So I just first want you to introduce yourself, give it a little bit of the basics, but also I know you got a laundry list of it, but all the journalistic work you've done.
Geez. Okay. So I started writing sports writing in high school for my high school's paper up here in Cleveland. And then I went to Ohio State where I joined the Lantern there. Sort of made my way through their paper and the process that they have. Um, but I also started covering the Browns back in 2019, first independently, and then it led to several other opportunities. So I was able to do that. And I wrote for Sports Illustrated subsite that covered the Browns. I wrote for Fansided, and now I am with 24/7 Sports, which is owned by CBS, and their site, the Orange and Brown Report, covering the Browns as well. So those are sort of the quick list of places that I've hit on and wrote for. But freelance wise, I've freelanced some from Cleveland.com. I freelanced for the Associated Press, so some of those sites as well, just on a freelance basis.
Perfect. And I think the first question that comes to mind with all that is, as a student, how do you balance all of that? That is a damn good laundry list right there.
I mean, the key is to just make sure that the people that you're working with understand what you have going on. So I'm never going to go into an opportunity and not tell people different things that I have to do. Everyone that I've worked with throughout my time in school has understood that school comes first, and that's been the bottom line. When I'm talking to people about what might make sense job wise or what they would want from me in a potential opportunity, the first thing that I mentioned to them is that I'm definitely willing to do it, but also they need to understand that I am a student and I am in school and that, classes and those things need to come first. And luckily for me, the people that I've worked with have all understood that. So at that point, it's just constant communication, whatever you're able to do, what not to do. I've been lucky enough to be able to just produce content as I can. So with my schedule, whenever I find gaps, I'm able to sit down, talk to different people, do interviews and whatnot, and continue to push out content. But it's really just making sure that people that you work with understand what else you have on your plate and just keeping open lines of communication.
Yeah, communication is key. And I want to talk about more of your experiences here in a second, but I first want to tell your story about how you got into journalism. What was your inspiration and how you got your foot in the door?
Yeah, so I grew up always a big fan of sports. Football was really my number one thing. But growing up in Cleveland, like you can ask anyone from this area, if you're a sports fan, you're really big into football, basketball, and baseball. So I was really big into football always, but being from Cleveland, like I love the Indians growing up, now the Guardians. I love the Cavs, like everything you just go to, you just want to die for those teams. So I grew up a big Browns fan. Being here, family had season tickets. I was at every game growing up. And I played sports growing up as well. So sports had always been around me. And I quickly realized when I was in high school that playing the sport would not, and this is, I know, a common thing, but playing the sport would never be the way that I would be able to get into it. And sports just meant so much to me and gave me so much that I knew that I wanted to somehow stay involved. And I loved writing. I hated writing about books or whatever it was in school. I hated writing about things I didn't care about. And then I started to write about sports, and I'm like, wait a minute, like I could write all day if it's about something I care about. So I realized that, and I started to take some journalism classes in high school. And during that time, I had an idea to start a social media platform, which at the time I have no idea why I did it. But it was June 2nd, 2019. It was in the summer. I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing. I just don't know what was going through my head. So I started an Instagram page just where I would sort of put out my thoughts on whatever the Browns were doing. And that's what I did that day. I wrote that night sitting in bed. I wrote what they should do with their kicking competition. I remember it was like three different players, two different players. what I thought they should do. And at the time, I was looking at this account, and I'm like, I don't even remember what the name was at that point. There was three people following along. It was my mom, my dad, maybe, and a friend or two. And I was just posting things. I don't know why I did it, but I just continued to do it. And over time, as you continue to get consistent with those things, people started to follow along. And I realized that it was a really, really slow process. So the first month, couple months were really just friends and maybe some family. I don't know what kept me going, but I did. And things started taking off and people started following, and it just over time was a steady increase of people wanting to hear what I had to say, which I thought was fascinating and I thought was great. So I continued doing it and continued to grow, and eventually, we're looking at the thousands and thousands and thousands of people following along. And so that continued to motivate me to keep doing it. And I was like, there's no reason for me to stop this. This is great. People are following along. Friends at first that were confused by what I was doing were starting to tell me like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. So it just continued to go. And through that, I was able to not only realize that this is something that I could continue to do, but also I can meet people who are already doing it, especially those who are already in the business. So the relationships that I've been able to build just through starting an Instagram page has been unbelievable. And the person that I'm still really, really close with, who helps me a ton, who I met through that Instagram page, is Jordan Schultz, and he now covers the NFL for Fox. He was not where he is now when I first met him. I think he was still breaking some news and covering the NFL independently. And I remember he kept tagging me in these posts, and I reached out to him and just sent him a DM. And I said, hey, if you ever get a second, would love to just pick your brain and get any advice you might have. And I gave him my phone number, and he saw the DM, I think maybe liked it, and said, "We'll do, like, I'm slammed right now, but we'll see what happens." And a couple weeks later, when I was least expecting it, he gave me a call, and we talked for about 15, 20 minutes. And he told me, and he gave me sort of a platform to just tell him where I saw myself and what I wanted to do. And I told him, and I just let my passion for what I was doing speak for itself. And by the end of the call, he told me that I'll never forget, he had never heard of someone at my age have this much passion for what I was doing. And on that phone call, he offered me an internship with him for that summer. And at the time, I had no idea. I was still, I think at this point, a senior in high school. Like, I still had no, like, internship. You're not even, I was not thinking about internships as a senior in high school. So he offered that to me, and he's like, I have a lot of people that ask me for these, but I see something in you and I want to help you. And so I ended up working with him and got really close with him. And he's been like that mentor for me ever since, that I know I can give a call, shoot a text, and he'll be there for me and sort of show me the ropes on different things. So I'm really thankful for him. But that is sort of how I got into it. And then that account really led me to different opportunities, and I've found the passion for myself in there.
Yeah, getting it, that's amazing. I mean, getting your foot in the door, the independent start. Then with Jordan Schultz, I did see that you interned with him, and I want to ask kind of the different stuff you did for him and what that internship looked like.
Yeah, it was really, really, um, I don't know the right word for it. It was very useful, but also wasn't something like specific that I was doing every day. It was more so whatever he needed. So he would shoot me a text. Hey, I'm interviewing on my show. I'm interviewing Eric Armstead later today. Any interesting facts or things that you can find about him? And I would send him back 10 minutes later, 15 bullet points of things that you'd have no idea that he ever did. And so those are things that are really fun in an interview, because a lot of people don't expect you to find some of these things. So different sports he's played or whatever it might have been, but it was definitely a lot of that, helping him prep for interviews and just sort of giving him some ideas of things that might, pique his interest to talk about. It was that, and it was a lot of also just editing video. When he would do these interviews, he would send me the recordings of it, and I would clip it so he can then post it on socials. Now I think he has people doing that for him full time. So my job is no longer needed with him. But no, I always would help him. If he texted me right now and needed something, I would do it without a doubt. We've gotten really close, and the amount of time he's put into me, phone calls we've had, and just the help that he's given me is amazing to see. And I don't get to see him a lot. So the one time a year really, which is at the combine where we get to meet up, it's a blast. And to be able to just hang out with him and just pick his brain in any way I can, or for him to even just tell me what's going on in his life, is just, it's really awesome.
All right, so you mentioned the combine is where you guys meet up. Do you get to go cover that for like with Ohio State or the Browns or?
Yeah, so I've been to three combines and I've covered them all for the Browns. Not for the Browns, for the Orange and Brown Report most recently. But yeah, I've covered them for the Browns outlet that I've been with. So that has been a blast, and to be able to do relationship build there, and get to know a lot more NFL people has been really helpful.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's got to carry you a leg up as you enter into college. And I want to talk about your work with the Lantern. Tell us what the Lantern is and the stuff you did there.
Yeah, so the Lantern is Ohio State's independent student paper news organization, and I originally started there freelancing. Is sort of how you get your start with the Lantern. So I freelanced. I was in sports, and I just was willing to do whatever it was. I was willing to cover a lot of different sports. There's 36 Division One sports at Ohio State, so there's plenty of options there in terms of coverage. I came into Ohio State, of course, wanting to cover football. I had been in NFL press boxes. I had been wherever it was in at Browns training camps and different practices, but I quickly realized that I wouldn't be able to just jump the gun, and I was okay with that. I knew that I was not going to be able to go and cover, Ohio State football as a sophomore. So when I got to Ohio State, I was freelancing covering different sports, did that for a couple semesters. And then there's a course at Ohio State that you have to take as a journalism major that is called Practicum, which everyone in the class gets assigned a beat for an entire semester. And that beat is basically what you do for the semester. So you can pick arts and life, campus, or sports. And of course, I was in the sports section, so you apply to the different sports that you want to cover. The only sport that wasn't offered in that class is football because that's what the editors cover. So in that class, men's basketball was an option, and at Ohio State, that's I guess really the second sport that gets the most attention, most talked about. So when I saw men's basketball was offered in that course, I knew that that was immediately something I wanted. So I applied for it, I got it, and I started covering the men's basketball team my junior year for the whole semester, which was in the spring, which for the most part for college basketball junkies, that's really the whole season. Missed a couple of out of conference games at the beginning, but yeah, covered the Big Ten season. And that was a hectic year because Ohio State fired their head coach, Chris Holtmann, in the middle of that season. So as a student, as a junior, I'm sitting in this room with different media outlets, national outlets. Columbus Dispatch is the one of the bigger outlets in Columbus. So covering this team for the student paper as a junior with all of these other professionals, and it was really cool to see how they worked, to see how they could mentor me and help me out as well. But yeah, I covered a hectic season. I think they set the program record for most consecutive away losses. I think it was like 16 or 17, so it was pretty crazy. And then they ended up firing their coach in the middle of the year. Emergency press conference, go with the AD. So it was crazy. And then get to know Jake Diebler. I got to know him before he took over as the interim guy, which was cool to see him then get promoted and then stick. So it was a fun season. And then that spring, I applied for the sports editor job, which would allow me to oversee all of our sports coverage and then obviously cover football full time. So I ended up getting that and then took off the summer for the most part, published a little bit, maybe once a week over the summer, and then got back to campus and we were full into football mode. So was at every away game during the regular season, traveled everywhere, covered every game, and then moved, of course, into the playoffs and they gave us quite a ride. We flew out to LA for the Rose Bowl, flew down south to Dallas for the Cotton Bowl, drove down to Atlanta for the national championship, and I mean, it was just a phenomenal experience to be able to be down there, be out there, actually be there covering the games, get to know the players throughout the season. Such a long season, so we were with the players a lot, coaches, and then sort of the icing on top at the end of our academic year, I sat down with the relationships that I had made, sat down with first our athletic director, Ross Bjork, for a one-on-one, which was actually our second this year that we did. And I sat down with Jake Diebler for a one-on-one as well. And then sort of the last thing that I did was a sit down with Ryan Day. It was the first time our student paper had ever gotten a one-on-one sit down in our studio on campus with a football head coach. So I was able to do that and hopefully start that as a tradition for once a year now for the future and hopefully set that up. But yeah, that's sort of the experience I've had with the Lantern. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this football season, but that was the perfect senior year that I could have ever asked for.
Oh, you know we're going to talk more about the football season, but I mean, I did see those last two interviews you did with Ebler and Ryan Day, and first of all, incredible interviews. But I mean, bring Ryan Day in for the first time. How are you guys able to do that? I mean, was that because like the rapport you built through relationships or the work you've done? Like, how are you able to get him in?
Think it was everything. I think it was both of those things. I can't speak on what former sports editors have done, but I wanted to make sure that I came in and not only was professional as I could, but just put the work in to want to be better at everything. And I think that that notion caught on to not only the Ohio State beat, which, first of all, a huge shout out to everyone on that beat. I don't think a lot of people understand how big that beat is. On the average day for press conferences, there is like 25 or 30 of us in a room. So it is a massive beat. And I got to genuinely get to know every single person there, and every single person wants to help. So that I'd say was a big help. But yeah, just the work that I did and the work that I put in, I think, translated, and people saw that. I know a lot of students who are even watching this who are in journalism, and I was one included when I first started, like sitting in a press conference room with someone of the magnitude as Ryan Day sitting at the front. Like you don't ever want to ask a question, right? It's scary. It is. And when I first, and I'm lucky to have been in that position with NFL head coaches right before when I was 19, 20 years old, Kevin Stefanski sitting in front of me. And I am scared to ask a question. Like I just didn't want to do it. And so being around that more opens you up to being willing to ask questions. So by the time I was a senior in college, I had been so used to it. So I was lucky enough to be able to have absolutely no fear and raise hand and ask questions. And I think not a lot of students have done that in the past. So to be able to sort of get the attention of Ryan Day and then also the sports information director that we have at Ohio State, Jerry Emig, built a phenomenal rapport with him, a super duper helpful person. So just I think everything combined and sort of some of my biggest stories from the year gaining traction throughout the team, throughout coaches, and then of course through the PR department. I think that everything people saw the professionalism, people saw the work that I had put in, so it made especially Ryan more willing to want to come in and sit down with me and have a conversation.
Dude, I almost forgot about your guys SID, Jerry. He was a great dude. I came out there for the Iowa Ohio State football game, the call game for our student radio. We don't need to talk about that game. It wasn't pretty for Iowa, but I mean, how different is it to be in that room? Like, there's a different perspective, I think, from someone who's writing on the Ohio State beat for the Athletic and a student reporter as yourself. How do you see the different perspectives in that light?
It was unique. And you mentioned the athletic. Cameron T. Robinson is a guy who has helped me a ton. And it's nice to know that guys like that are mentors, and guys like that are always willing to help. So it's a unique way of thinking about it, but we're almost competing against each other in a sense. Now, I'm not sure how concerned he was about the student paper writing for the athletic, but in a sense, like you're competing with everybody else in that room. And everyone sort of knows that, but at the same time, everyone's willing to help and everyone's willing to aim you in the right direction and compliment things you're doing. So it was a lot of fun, but it was also nice to get to know those people and get to know that and understand that they're there for you. I'll highlight the one story I did after a couple days after the national championship. I don't know if we were going to talk about this or not, but a couple days after the national championship, I published a story that took you inside a team meeting that Ohio State had, that took off on our site. Totally took off on socials. I think it was almost at 500,000 views on socials. What I did was based on relationships I had built with coaches, with players especially, that helped me out a lot with this story. I knew that after that Michigan game, it was being in that press box after the Michigan game was like you never heard it before. I mean, people were shocked. Nobody had expected them to lose again to Michigan. And so after that, in that press conference, like you just got the vibe of the team was just totally off, totally down. They were confused as to how they could possibly lose that game. And so And the days after, we knew that they would still have an opportunity to compete for a national championship. We just didn't know where they would be, who they would be playing. And so I knew that that Tuesday after the Saturday game, I think it was Tuesday, they had a players only meeting that Ryan Day was in for most of it. And then Ryan ended up leaving and letting the players finish it. And so after that Tennessee game, and they blew the doors off of Tennessee, I thought that something in that meeting had to have transpired. Something had to have happened. It had to be significant for them to just totally turn around and do what they did. And then after they won the Rose Bowl and the way they did against Oregon, I knew that there was a real shot that they could win this whole thing. And if they did, then I think that meeting could be a phenomenal story. Now, at that time, I had no idea what happened in there. So after the Rose Bowl, I started to talk to some of the players that I got close with off the record about just what that meeting was and what it meant to them. And so as I started getting a better understanding of what the meeting was, I knew that for sure it was something I wanted to focus on. And so I started interviewing on the record at the Cotton Bowl about that meeting and what it was like. And it was, I kid you not, 10 to 15 different interviews with different players, just trying to piece together what happened because no coaches were in there except for Ryan. And I wasn't going to talk to Ryan one on one during one of these things about that meeting. So I was talking to players, it was questions of like, where was Ryan sitting in that room? Because that's the room that we go in for press conferences. So I know what the room looks like. I just want to know where people were. So I'm asking, where was Ryan? Where was he sitting? Where was the chair? Like, what chair was it? So getting all the details. And then as I continued to do those interviews, the story kind of started putting itself together. And I was able to get players go on the record and really not only tell me what was going on in the meeting, but what the meeting meant to them, the tears that people had. So nobody knew about this meeting for the most part, and then you would start understanding that there were tears and the amount of tension that was in the room to start, like that was significant. And then they go on, win the championship, and I remember vividly in the locker room after they had won the championship, I had went up to a lot of the players that I talked to about this meeting leading up, and I told them, I said, all right, like I'm writing this story now because you guys just did this. Now that you can look back on this meeting and now that you're sitting here smoking a cigar and know that you're national champions, like what did that meeting mean? And so I got the emotion of like these players fresh off a national championship win. So I pieced that all together and I put it in a story and I worked hard on it. I edited it myself with mentors. Like I put it through hours and hours of editing. I was waking up, I remember with one of my professors, like at 8 or 9 a.m., we met for coffee on a Saturday. And we just edited that thing for 3 or 4 hours to make it the best it possibly could. And it ended up, yeah, it came out amazing. And I'm super proud of it. And the amount of time and effort I put into it, just weeks and weeks of interviewing. So that I think was to hear the feedback that I got on from a lot of the Ohio State beat to sort of wrap this around to the mentors and people that are on that beat. I got messages from just about everyone, text, DMs, that it was one of the best stories they had read from the whole season, one of the best stories they had read, period. Like it meant a lot. And definitely those things propel you and want you to make you keep working and just to keep going.
That's incredibly impressive, first of all. I mean, that's a lot going into it. And of course, we do have to talk about a national championship winning season. How do you even go back to campus the same after that? That's a once in a lifetime experience for a lot of student reporters. So being a student on campus, trying to balance the professionalism being a reporter, but I gotta imagine being a fan a little bit as well, being pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was really difficult to report on a season and a team that I grew up rooting for. And it's similar to what I had to do with the Cleveland Browns as well. I had to put away the bias. But that was something that again, I'm lucky that I had already had to do that once, so I knew how to operate and I knew how to act during the season. So there's no doubt that like during that Tennessee game, there were times where I internally just wanted them to win because I just wanted to go to a Rose Bowl. I just wanted the experience. During the season, it was definitely easier for me, and I know harder for some of my peers to put away the fandom and to report and write stories honestly. After the Michigan game, I think was the honest test of we're not going to write. I mean, there's nothing we can write that's going to defend this team of losing that game again. So after that game, we wrote stories on why they lost. Look, they did lose. That's the reality of the situation, and here's why it happened. So yeah, I think it was definitely unique and not easy to write from an unbiased perspective, but I did it. I like to think that people appreciated that, despite being a student news outlet, and everyone's students there. But now looking back on the season, man, am I glad that they won the whole thing because we got to go on that ride with them. So it was great.
Yeah, getting that's a privilege too to get there, be able to travel everywhere. Talk to me about the Rose Bowl Stadium. How cool is like that was the Rose Bowl. We had a guy go out there because we played at UCLA this year, but I mean the actual Rose Bowl itself has got to be a completely different experience.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Just the whole scene, everything about it, like even just being in the hotel in downtown LA, like knowing what you're there for. And again, the playoffs didn't start until after our spring break was over or our winter break was over. So during winter break, I'm sitting there, waiting and seeing the end of the season, and there's not much going on over that winter break time. And then once school starts, okay, then we're going to start traveling for a playoff run. And so I'm glad my professors understood what was going on. And so we were able to go out there and get school stuff done before we left. But yeah, you go out there days before because there's media days, there's different things. So we're out there for 3 nights, whatever it was. So it was a blast, and I was able to, yeah, do that and cover a Rose Bowl and the scene and the sunset. Like it was just all unbelievable.
Did you guys go to the parade at all?
We did not. We had our photographer was out there for a little bit, but we did not go to the parade. We chose to stay at the hotel, and they had shuttles bus us out there to the stadium, which were actually police escorted for the media, which was unbelievable. So we were able to get out there relatively quick.
That's incredible. I don't know if I've ever heard of police escort for media at a game. Was that even the same situation in the national championship?
No, it was the only one that they did it. And I think a big part of it was there's only really one road to get into the Rose Bowl Stadium.
Oh
It's
yeah.
one way in, one way out. So I think without it, it would have probably been really difficult to be able to get there quickly enough to cover the game.
Yeah, no, okay, that makes sense. I've been down in that area once before, not for a game, and that now thinking about the one road, that makes a lot more sense. But I want to move on and ask about this. I'm prolonging the Browns thing as much as possible because I told you right before we started recording, I'm down in Cincinnati, so I'm a Bengals fan. There's a little bit clash right there, but I did notice I was looking through your website. You freelance with the Associated Press at one point, and one thing you covered, it was, and I believe you said breaking news with it, was the Johnny Gaudreau unfortunately had when he passed away from a car accident. NHL player for the Blue Jackets. I mean, talk to me about that process. Like, how do you get all that information? How did all that go?
Yeah, that was a tough one. That was the first time I'd ever freelanced for the AP as well. So the stakes were high for me and for the story itself. What the process of that was my professor and one of my biggest mentors, her name is Nicole Kraft. She teaches sports journalism at Ohio State. She covers the Blue Jackets for the Associated Press in the evenings when they have games. So that's what her, I guess that's what she loves doing it. And that's what she does. And a lot of the nights, especially when they have games, home games, she is there covering the team, which is cool to see a professor who also is directly in the profession that you want to get into. And so my senior year, I was her teaching assistant for her sports journalism class. So I helped her with that class. And that obviously was breaking news. Nobody expected anything like that to happen. And so the press conference that the Blue Jackets had put together was during our class period that we had. And so she had to stay and teach. And so she trusted me enough, and I'm lucky she trusted me enough to go out there and cover that for the Associated Press. So I was out there at their stadium cover or their arena covering the press conference, and all of that, and turned it and submitted it to the AP. And then she went to an event that they had for him at night. So I was able to sort of get that byline, my first ever byline in the AP. Unfortunately, is for a story like that, but I'm also glad that I was able to experience something like that because in this business, once you experience something once, you know how it works and you know how to operate it the next time. So yeah, I mean, it was very, very sad to hear his teammates, the day after, a couple days after, talk about him as a person and his family. It was devastating, but yeah, the experience that I got from it was great.
Yeah, I mean it was a really crazy moment, really shocking moment, I think, for everyone. And I think now I'll go ahead and go and ask about the Browns. As much as it might pain me as a Bengals fan. But I want to ask first. I mean, obviously you've talked about it a bunch already, but covering the Browns in Cleveland, Ohio, from Columbus, Ohio, how does that kind of work?
Yeah, so my freshman year, I actually was at Kent State University, which is a school outside of Cleveland, about 40 minutes outside of Cleveland. And there I was able to come back on the weekends and cover because it was only, again, 40 minutes. So I was able to come back and cover the Browns for the most part every weekend. And then as I continued moving up to Ohio State, I spent some of my weekends traveling back here. But then again, once I started covering football, I wasn't able to come back and cover games, but luckily enough, we have a great team over there and we have people there anyways. So it was just a plus for me to get out there. But I was able to still watch games on Sundays, take notes, different things, still write pieces. So it was different traveling back to the 2 hours from Columbus to Cleveland to cover a Browns game. But at the end of the day, like that's what I love doing and that's what I wanted to do. So I'm glad that I was able to do it and meet the people that are with the team and with the media that covers the team. So just more relationships that I've been able to build and people I've gotten to be able to know.
Absolutely. And I want to go a little bit more behind the scenes with you in a moment, but I got to ask you first. I mean, what's up with the QB room situation? What's your opinion on that right now?
I think that, they traded for Kenny Pickett. They gave up assets for him, so they see something in him. They think that his year can be like a Sam Darnold type of turnaround. So they're gonna give him a shot, that's for sure. I'd be surprised if they don't end up starting him. We'll see what happens, but I know they have Joe, and I know how excited Joe is to be in Cleveland, back in Cleveland, and ready to compete for a starting job. But in my opinion, right now, I think Kenny Pickett is the guy that's going to start week one, but a lot can change, obviously, between now and then.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from not being there, not knowing all the details of it, I mean, it feels like there's so many different directions they can go. So interesting to hear about that. I love technology sometimes. That's the one thing I always tell. I'll get on an interview with someone and I'll sit there and I'll go, I do all this stuff. I should know how all the tech works, right? And then I just shake my head because I
Yeah,
know
no.
so much of it sometimes. Okay, but all right, so we've been go, 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 and I just want to take a timeout, a little water break real quick and just ask you about some of your favorite experiences or like maybe some funny interactions, weird interactions, cool interactions you've had, whether it's been up with the Browns, Ohio State, something else in general. I know you already mentioned your favorite, one of your most proud stories, but what's some other stuff that comes to mind immediately when you think of how fun this job's been?
Um, I'll think of sort of a welcome to college moment for me. I was covering a men's hockey game, and that was never something that I had really followed super close growing up. I knew what hockey was. I would put it on the TV to watch the NHL every so often, but never followed it close, never knew the rules. And when I knew that I had to cover a game as a freelancer at Ohio State, I did some research. I was, trying to find out more about the sport. And I was at the game. I covered the game itself. I walked down to the post game press conference, and I was waiting for people to file in for it to be for the presser to start. And I was the first one in there, but I didn't get down there particularly quick, which was weird. And there was nobody in there, and we're getting closer, and the SID walks in, and she's like, "All right, I have coach and a couple players here for you. I guess you're the only one today." And I had I didn't prepare questions. I was anticipating just sitting in the corner, like we mentioned earlier, and just letting people ask questions and just taking these quotes and getting out of there because I did not know enough to ask questions and be super involved in a press conference. So I'm the only one in there in front of three players that have been playing hockey their whole life and the head coach of Ohio State hockey. And I was able to somehow come up with questions off the rip for whatever I needed, and I didn't sound like an idiot. At least they didn't tell me I did, or nobody said anything. So I was able to make it out. But I think that was the welcome to college moment because it was one of the first events I'd ever covered at Ohio State. But that experience was a lot of fun, and looking back on it, knowing that I made it out of there without damaging any reputation or anything like that was funny. Some of the I think really the moments that I cherish the most are just the ability for me to develop relationships with players, especially this past season with football. I have a different ability that a lot of other people on the beat don't have of being around their age. And you included, like we have this ability to develop unique relationships with players because we're close in their age and because we can connect with them on a different level than a lot of other people that are covering these colleges and these teams can. So yeah, just getting to talk to guys about classes and about how their personal lives are and their families and different things like that. I was able to do that and get close with a lot of guys on the football team this year, and they're honestly friendships that I'll be able to keep for a long time. And I think the probably notable one is Will Howard, and how good of a dude he is when you get to know him, and just seeing him go through the then NFL process, and just trying to be a resource for him whenever you can. Just if he needs anything, just to reach out, because once you get to know these guys, they're human and they want to genuinely get to know people, and to see people coming at you just wanting to ask about personal things, and just get to know you first before looking at you and asking you for a quote for a story. The relationship is the most important part. And so getting to know guys like Will, Seth McLaughlin is another phenomenal dude that I got to know during the season. And even Jeremiah Smith, like just such a quiet person. But once you get time with them, like they just totally open up and want to continue talking, and know that you're there for them, and know that you're not just there to get something out of them. I think is the most important part. So those friendships, whether that's even with people in the media, with people on the team, with coaches, like any of that, just being genuine, I think is the biggest thing for me, and it's something that I'll always look back on.
It can be so incredible talking to some of those guys. But I mean, I've heard things about Will Howard being a great dude, and a lot about that Ohio State roster for the football team being a lot of great dudes. But I mean, Iowa had the same situation where a lot of guys went to the Steelers. Did it ever like kind of irk you that Will Howard's going to go be in Pittsburgh for a bit?
No, not at all. I'm so happy for Will and Jack even too. Like, just I know Will, and I know he wanted to be in Pittsburgh if possible. Because Pittsburgh was one of the teams that I think showed a lot of interest in him throughout the pre-draft process. So just seeing them take him and seeing the emotion that he had, and just to be able to shoot him a text and tell him how happy I was for him, like, and just to see his reaction and how thankful he was for me to be able to yeah, it means a lot. And so just those relationships, and just seeing guys that you got to know, and seeing their dreams be fulfilled, like it's a really, really cool experience.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then I want to ask you, as you mentioned, Kevin Stefanski, head coach for the Cleveland Browns earlier, and just being in press conferences with him. I don't know how much you've interacted with him, maybe even one on one, but is it any different than the other reporters that are there as you're there, like younger, of course, with an NFL head coach?
Yeah, I'm definitely still more on the quiet side when covering the Browns. If something needs to be asked, then it'll happen. But I've talked to him a couple of times one on one, especially at the combine, is when you'll catch a lot of those guys walking from place to place, and just available and willing to talk. So I've talked to him a couple of times at the combine, similar with Andrew Barry. But yeah, it's definitely still different. But I think at this point, I've gotten to know a lot of the guys on the Browns beat, the people on the Browns beat, I should say, pretty well. And so I think they understand where I'm coming from. We have a mutual respect, and they see, and those are a lot of the people that I'm texting in between the weeks and asking for advice on different things. So they know exactly the position that I'm in, and are always willing to help. So yeah, it's definitely unique, but it's also fun to be in those rooms and sort of really just observe and see what they're doing, because those are things that you want to take with you, that you're going to implement into what you do, as soon as you move on throughout your journey and into the professional realm. So it's been really cool to just see how they operate and see how they work. I know like Mary Kay Cabot does such a good job in Cleveland, like just seeing how she operates out in these different places, and relationship builds. Like I think it's motivating.
Absolutely. And I think I just want to hit on a few other things here. And you kind of touched on it with the relationships you build with players. And I want to ask you from your perspective, why is student journalism important? Why should it be respected, especially compared to a lot of professional outlets?
Well, you always see when you're looking at jobs, and this probably goes for a lot of different career paths, but everyone always wants experience when you're getting into a job, right? So without student journalism, if you want to get into journalism, you need the experience to get into it. And that's exactly what student journalism does. It gives students the opportunity to make mistakes and the opportunity to correct those mistakes and continue getting the experience and getting comfortable in these types of environments. I couldn't imagine if I didn't do any of these things wanting to get into journalism. I don't think it'd be possible. If you don't have experience, especially in journalism, looking for your first, second job, like you're never going to get into it. And so being able to be a student, continue to focus on school, but also get the reps and the opportunity to be out there and be vulnerable and ask these questions, and be nervous asking questions. And like most coaches, especially at Ohio State, understand, with students in their first or second games, like covering games, asking questions, they can tell that you're nervous. And I think the best moment is when a coach can understand that you're nervous, or if you trip up over a word or two because you're nervous asking a question. Like a lot of coaches, especially in college with student reporters, understand that and are willing to help. That's always how Jake Dealer was with me, wanting to help, always wanting to come and say hi and see how I was doing, and vice versa. Just developing those relationships, even with coaches, like that can be really, really good experience for any college student. And so I would just say, yeah, the experience of getting to be out there, getting to actually do it. One of my best pieces of advice I've ever gotten was you can always sit in a classroom and get taught about journalism, but until you actually do it, you can't learn a lot. You can't learn as much as you'll want to. So getting out there, actually doing it, making the mistakes and seeing how you can correct them is the biggest thing. Without student journalism, those wouldn't be possible.
No, and you kind of almost stole the last thing for me right there, and I'm going to ask it anyway still because I think everyone comes from a different background with different experiences. If someone was coming out of high school and wanting to get into journalism in general, what would be your main piece of advice to them?
I would say the two biggest things in journalism are to be relentless and be yourself. If you can be yourself, then you're going to be able to build relationships with people that are in the business, with people that are players, with people that are other media professionals, and they're willing to always help. So I would say be relentless in the sense of wanting to do it. You have to want to get better in journalism. You can't just get into it and sort of just walk your way through it. You have to be eager. You have to want to learn. You have to be a say yes person to everything. I've always been if anyone asks me to do anything, it's always a yes, no matter what. And if it's something I've never done before, then I'll get to know if I want to do that in the future or if I don't. So I would say be relentless, be yourself, and just put yourself out there. Like I had never been the type of person to want to go up to someone and introduce myself, but now it's second nature and just wanting to develop more relationships and get to know more people. So just, yeah, like I said, be relentless, be yourself, and you just have to go get it.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. I think I've taken probably enough of your time, but I want to leave this last moment here to give yourself a chance to get a shout out to all your stuff, plug anything you want to real quick, your websites, Twitter, anything you want to.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Noah Weiskopf, and then Instagram covering the Browns as well at Browns with Noah. But those are really the two social platforms that I use. Other than that, yeah, I mean, just continue for everyone listening, continue to be motivated, continue to get out there doing things. And as students, like this is a prime opportunity to put yourself out there, to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to do anything. Say yes, and then you'll learn from things as you go. So take the experience of being in school and continue to attack them and go cover different things that you've never covered. So I'd say the biggest thing.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate it. I'll make sure I link all of that stuff wherever this may be posted. I know it'll be on YouTube and probably some other outlets as well. But yeah, Noah, you're incredible talent. Really appreciate you taking some time to join me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Colin.
Again, make sure to check out all of Noah's content. Even if you're a Bengals fan like me, he's an incredibly talented writer with a lot of impressive work out there. And if you want to stay up to date with all upcoming episodes, make sure to follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at C_Crithers33. We just walked the student beat. I'll see you next week for a new episode.